One day, my English lessons ceased abruptly. The weather was getting hot, and one of my pupils, feeling too lazy to go on with his lessons, dismissed me. The other disappeared from his lodgings without notice, owing me 12 francs. I was left with only 30 centimes and no tobacco. For a day and a half I had nothing to eat or smoke, and then, too hungry to put it off any longer, I packed my remaining clothes into my suitcase and took them to the pawn shop. This put an end to all pretense of being in funds, for I could not take my clothes out of the hotel without asking Madame F's leave. I remember, however, how surprised she was at my asking her, instead of removing the clothes on the sly, shooting the moon being a common trick in our quarter. It was the first time I had been in a French pawn shop. One went through grandiose stone portals, marked of course Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. They write that even over the police stations in France. Into a large, bare room like a school classroom, with a counter and rows of benches. 40 or 50 people were waiting. One handed one's pledge over the counter and sat down. Presently, when the clerk had assessed its value, he would call out, "Numéro such and such. Will you take 50 francs? Sometimes it was only 15 francs, or 10 or 5. Whatever it was, the whole room knew it. As I came in, the clerk called with an air of offence, "Numéro 83, here," and gave a little whistle and a beckon, as though calling a dog. Numéro 83 stepped to the counter. He was an old, bearded man with an overcoat buttoned up at the neck and frayed trouser ends. Without a word, the clerk shot the bundle across the counter. Evidently, it was worth nothing. It fell to the ground and came open, displaying 4 pairs of men's woolen pants. No one could help laughing. Poor Numéro 83 gathered up his pants and shambled out, muttering to himself. The clothes I was pawning, together with the suitcase, had cost over £20, and were in good condition. I thought they must be worth £10, and a quarter of this, one expects quarter value at a pawn shop, was 250 or 300 francs. I waited without anxiety, expecting 200 francs at the worst. At last, the clerk called my number, Numéro 97. "Yes," I said, standing up. 70 francs? 70 francs for £10 worth of clothes. But it was no use arguing. I had seen someone else attempt to argue, and the clerk had instantly refused the pledge. I took the money and the pawn ticket and walked out. I had now no clothes except what I stood up in. The coat badly out at the elbow, an overcoat moderately pawnable, and one spare shirt. Afterwards, when it was too late, I learned that it was wiser to go to a pawn shop in the afternoon. The clerks are French, and like most French people, are in a bad temper till they have eaten their lunch. When I got home, Madame F was sweeping the bistro floor. She came up the steps to meet me. I could see in her eye that she was uneasy about my rent. "Well," she said, "what did you get for your clothes? Not much, eh?" 200 francs, I said promptly. "Tiens," she said, surprised. "Well, that's not bad. How expensive those English clothes must be." The lie saved a lot of trouble, and strangely enough, it came true. A few days later, I did receive exactly 200 francs due to me for a newspaper article, and though it hurt to do it, I at once paid every penny of it in rent. So though I came near to starving in the following weeks, I was hardly ever without a roof. It was now absolutely necessary to find work, and I remembered a friend of mine, a Russian waiter named Boris, who might be able to help me. I had first met him in the public ward of a hospital, where he was being treated for arthritis in the left leg. He had told me to come to him if I were ever in difficulties. I must say something about Boris, for he was a curious character and my close friend for a long time. He was a big, soldierly man of about 35 and had been good-looking, but since his illness he had grown immensely fat from lying in bed. Like most Russian refugees, he had had an adventurous life. His parents, killed in the revolution, had been rich people, and he had served through the war in the 2nd Siberian Rifles, which, according to him, was the best regiment in the Russian army. After the war, he had first worked in a brush factory, then as a porter at Les Halles, then had become a dishwasher, and had finally worked his way up to be a waiter. When he fell ill, he was at the hotel's scribe, and taking 100 francs a day in tips. His ambition was to become a maître d'hôtel, save 50,000 francs, and set up a small, select restaurant on the right bank. Boris always talked of the war as the happiest time of his life. War and soldiering were his passion. He had read innumerable books of strategy and military history, and could tell you all about the theories of Napoleon, Kutuzov, Clausewitz, Moltke and Foch. Anything to do with soldiers pleased him. His favourite café was the Glosserie des Lilas in Montparnasse, simply because the statue of Marshal Ney stands outside it. Later on, Boris and I sometimes went to the Rue du Commerce together. If we went by metro, Boris always got out at Cambronne station instead of Commerce, though Commerce was nearer. He liked the association with General Cambronne, who was called on to surrender at Waterloo, and answered simply, "Merde." The only things left to Boris by the revolution were his medals and some photographs of his old regiment. He had kept these when everything else went to the pawn shop. Almost every day he would spread the photographs out on the bed and talk about them. "Voilà, mon ami. There you see me at the head of my company. Fine big men, eh? Not like these little rats of Frenchmen. A captain at 20, not bad, eh? Yes, a captain in the 2nd Siberian Rifles, and my father was a colonel. Ah, mais, mon ami, the ups and downs of life. A captain in the Russian army and then, piff, the revolution, every penny gone. In 1916, I stayed a week at the Hotel Edouard Septembre. In 1920, I was trying for a job as night watchman there. I have been night watchman, cellarman, floor scrubber, dishwasher, porter, lavatory attendant. I have tipped waiters, and I have been tipped by waiters. Ah, but I have known what it is to live like a gentleman, mon ami. I do not say it to boast, but the other day I was trying to compute how many mistresses I have had in my life, and I made it out to be over 200. Yes, at least 200. Ah well, ça reviendra. Victory is to him who fights the longest. Courage, etc., etc. Boris had a queer, changeable nature. He always wished himself back in the army, but he had also been a waiter long enough to acquire the waiter's outlook. Though he had never saved more than a few thousand francs, he took it for granted that in the end he would be able to set up his own restaurant and grow rich. All waiters, I afterwards found, talk and think of this. It is what reconciles them to being waiters. Boris used to talk interestingly about hotel life. Waiting is a gamble, he used to say. You may die poor, you may make your fortune in a year. You are not paid wages, you depend on tips, 10% of the bill, and a commission from the wine companies on champagne corks. Sometimes the tips are enormous. The barman at Maxim's, for instance, makes 500 francs a day, more than 500 in the season. I have made 200 francs a day myself. It was at a hotel in Biarritz in the season. The whole staff from the manager down to the plongeur was working 21 hours a day. 21 hours work and 2.5 hours in bed, for a month on end. Still, it was worth it, at 200 francs a day. You never know when a stroke of luck is coming. Once, when I was at the Hotel Royal, an American customer sent for me before dinner and ordered 24 brandy cocktails. I brought them all together on a tray, in 24 glasses. "Now, garçon," said the customer, he was drunk, "I'll drink 12 and you'll drink 12. And if you can walk to the door afterwards, you get 100 francs. I walked to the door and he gave me 100 francs. And every night for 6 days he did the same thing. 12 brandy cocktails, then 100 francs. A few months later, I heard he had been extradited by the American government, embezzlement. There is something fine, do you not think, about these Americans? I liked Boris, and we had interesting times together, playing chess and talking about war and hotels. Boris used often to suggest that I should become a waiter. The life would suit you, he used to say. When you're in work with 100 francs a day and a nice mistress, it's not bad. You say you go in for writing. Writing is bosh. There is only one way to make money at writing, and that is to marry a publisher's daughter. But you would make a good waiter if you shaved that moustache off. You are tall and you speak English. Those are the chief things a waiter needs. Wait till I can bend this accursed leg, mon ami. And then, if you are ever out of a job, come to me. Now that I was short of my rent and getting hungry, I remembered Boris's promise and decided to look him up at once. I did not hope to become a waiter so easily as he had promised, but of course I knew how to scrub dishes, and no doubt he could get me a job in the kitchen. He had said that dishwashing jobs were to be had for the asking during the summer. It was a great relief to remember that I had, after all, one influential friend to fall back on.